She stands at the altar in her grandmother's vintage lace wedding dress, her hands trembling slightly as she holds her bouquet. Her soon-to-be husband, David, squeezes her hand reassuringly. Everything is absolutely perfect, or so it seems. Suddenly, the massive oak doors at the back of the cathedral creak open. Every head turns. The organist's fingers freeze on the keys. A hush falls over the entire congregation. Standing in the doorway is a woman most of the guests have never seen before. She's wearing a simple navy blue dress, clearly her best outfit, and her graying hair is neatly pulled back. Her weathered hands clutch a small wrapped gift. This is Margaret Thompson, and if you saw her 6 months ago, you wouldn't recognize her now. But Sarah? Sarah's eyes immediately fill with tears, and a radiant smile spreads across her face. "Margaret," she whispers, her voice carrying in the silent cathedral. But Margaret isn't alone. Behind her, filing through the doorway with military precision, come 15 soldiers in full dress uniform. Their medals catch the sunlight. Their boots echo in perfect synchronization against the marble floor. The congregation gasps collectively. Some people actually stand up to get a better look. What do you think is happening right now? Have you ever witnessed a moment so unexpected that it gave you chills? Let me know in the comments. The soldiers form two perfect lines down the center aisle, creating an honor guard. And as Margaret walks between them toward the altar, something magical happens. These battle-hardened military men and women begin to smile. Some have tears in their eyes. The bride's father leans over to the groom's mother and whispers, "Who are these people?" But Sarah knows exactly who they are, and she knows exactly why they're here. Let me take you back 18 months earlier to a cold Tuesday morning in downtown Portland. Sarah Mitchell was rushing to her job at the marketing firm, clutching her usual coffee and bread ring from the corner cafe. She was just another busy professional, focused on deadlines and client meetings. That's when she first saw Margaret. Margaret was sitting on the concrete steps outside the old library, wrapped in a thin blanket that had seen better days. Her cardboard sign simply read, "Hungry. Anything helps. God bless." Now, Sarah had walked past homeless individuals before. We all have. Most of us feel that pang of sympathy, maybe drop some change and continue on our way. But something about Margaret was different. Maybe it was the dignity in her posture, or the way she quietly said thank you to everyone, even those who walked by without stopping. Sarah stopped that day. She knelt down and offered Margaret her bread ring. "Thank you, sweetheart," Margaret said, her voice rough but kind. "That's very thoughtful of you." Their conversation was brief. Sarah was late for work, after all. But Margaret mentioned she was a veteran, and something in Sarah's heart shifted. You see, Sarah's grandfather had been a World War II veteran. He'd told her stories about coming home from the war, about how difficult it was to readjust, about friends who never quite found their footing again. Looking at Margaret, Sarah saw her grandfather's face. Here's what's beautiful about kindness. It often starts with just one moment of connection, one decision to see another person's humanity. The next morning, Sarah bought 2 bagels instead of 1, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. What started as a simple gesture began to evolve into something much deeper. Sarah learned that Margaret Thompson had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a medic. She'd saved countless lives, earning several commendations for valor. But when she came home, she struggled with PTSD. She lost her job, then her apartment, then eventually found herself on the streets. "I used to save people," Margaret told Sarah one morning. "Now I can barely save myself." But Sarah saw something that Margaret couldn't see in herself. The heart of a hero that was still beating strong. Sarah started bringing more than just food. She brought coffee on cold mornings, a warm scarf when winter hit, sometimes just conversation when Margaret looked particularly lonely. Other people began to notice. They'd see this young professional woman sitting on the library steps, talking and laughing with someone most of society had forgotten. Some of Sarah's colleagues thought she was crazy. "You can't save everyone," they'd tell her. But Sarah wasn't trying to save everyone. She was just trying to be kind to one person. And here's something incredible about kindness. It's contagious. When we show genuine care for one person, it ripples outward in ways we can't even imagine. As months passed, Margaret began to change. Not just physically, though the regular meals and Sarah's encouragement to visit the Veterans Health Center were clearly helping. Margaret began to stand a little straighter. She started sharing stories about her military service with pride instead of shame. She talked about her fellow soldiers, about the lives she'd saved, about the brotherhood and sisterhood she'd experienced in the service. One day, about 8 months into their friendship, Margaret mentioned something that stopped Sarah in her tracks. "You know, Sarah, your kindness reminds me of something we used to say in the military. We had this motto, 'Leave no one behind.' You've been living that motto with me, even though you've never served." Sarah was touched, but Margaret wasn't finished. "I've been thinking about my old unit. I lost touch with most of them after I came home. I was too ashamed of where I ended up. But talking with you has made me realize something. They wouldn't judge me. They'd want to help, just like you have." With Sarah's encouragement, Margaret began reaching out to her former military family. What she discovered was overwhelming. Her old unit had been looking for her for years. When she disappeared from their lives, they were heartbroken. They'd tried to find her through veterans organizations, through social media, through any means they could think of. Margaret had saved the life of every single person in her unit at one point or another during their deployments. She was their hero, and they'd never forgotten her. Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past who meant the world to you? How did it feel? Share your story in the comments. When Sarah announced her engagement to David, Margaret was one of the first people she told. They were sitting on their usual library steps, sharing coffee and watching the morning rush hour. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "You deserve all the joy in the world." "I want you to be there," Sarah said immediately. "At the wedding. You're family to me now, Margaret." Margaret's eyes widened. "Oh, Sarah, I couldn't. I don't have anything appropriate to wear, and I wouldn't fit in with your fancy friends." "Margaret Thompson," Sarah said firmly, "you're a decorated war hero and one of the kindest people I know. You belong anywhere you want to be." But Sarah had another idea brewing. Through her conversations with Margaret, she'd learned the names and contact information of several soldiers from Margaret's old unit. What if? Sarah spent weeks secretly coordinating. She reached out to Margaret's former commanding officer, Sergeant Major Rodriguez, who was now stationed at Fort Lewis. She explained the situation, how she'd met Margaret, how their friendship had developed, and how much it would mean to have Margaret's military family present at the wedding. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Ma'am," Sergeant Major Rodriguez said over the phone, "Margaret Thompson saved my life in Kandahar. She saved all our lives at one point or another. If she's getting the recognition and love she deserves, we want to be part of that. We'll be there." What Sarah didn't know was that news of Margaret's situation had spread throughout the entire veteran community. Social media posts were shared. Phone calls were made. The story of the young woman who'd shown unwavering kindness to a forgotten hero touched hearts across the country. Veterans organizations stepped up. Margaret was connected with housing assistance. She was enrolled in specialized PTSD treatment programs. Job training opportunities were offered. But more than that, she was welcomed back into a community that had never forgotten her. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, Margaret had her own small apartment. She was receiving proper medical care. She'd even started volunteering at a veterans center, using her experiences to help other struggling vets. But she never forgot those morning conversations with Sarah on the library steps. Those moments of human connection had been the catalyst for everything that followed. This is the power of kindness. Everyone. It doesn't just change the person who receives it, it changes the person who gives it, and it ripples out to change entire communities. Now back to that perfect spring morning at St. Mary's Cathedral. As Margaret walks down the aisle between the honor guard of soldiers, Sarah finally understands the full magnitude of what's happening. These aren't just any soldiers. These are Margaret's brothers and sisters in arms, the people whose lives she saved, the family she thought she'd lost forever. Sergeant Major Rodriguez steps forward. His voice carries clearly throughout the cathedral as he addresses the congregation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to honor two heroes. One is Margaret Thompson, a decorated combat medic who saved countless lives in service to our country. The other is Sarah Mitchell, who saved Margaret's life through the simple power of human kindness. The congregation erupts in applause. Sarah is crying openly now, and so is Margaret. Even David is wiping his eyes. But Rodriguez isn't finished. Medic Thompson, by order of the United States Army, you are hereby awarded the Good Conduct Medal for civilian service for your continued service to fellow veterans in need. He pins a medal to Margaret's dress as the soldiers salute. Let me ask you, can you imagine a more beautiful moment? When was the last time you witnessed pure goodness being recognized? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. The wedding ceremony that follows is unlike anything the guests have ever experienced. Margaret sits in the front row, surrounded by her military family. When the officiant asks if anyone objects to the union, Sergeant Major Rodriguez stands up. The congregation holds its breath. "I don't object," he says with a smile. "I just want to say that if these two represent the future of our country, where kindness is valued, where no one is left behind, where love conquers all, then we're in good hands." The applause is thunderous. When Sarah and David exchange vows, they include a special promise: to always remember that kindness is the greatest gift we can give each other, and that every person we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about. At the reception, Margaret is treated like the guest of honor she truly is. The soldiers share stories of her heroism in Afghanistan. They talk about how she risked her life repeatedly to save theirs, how she was the heart and soul of their unit. But Margaret, in her speech, turns the focus back to Sarah. "This young woman," she says, her voice strong and clear, "taught me something I'd forgotten. She taught me that I was still worthy of love, still worthy of respect, still worthy of being seen. She didn't just give me food for my body, she gave me food for my soul." Sarah's grandmother's pearl necklace catches the light as Sarah stands to respond. "Margaret taught me something too," Sarah says. "She taught me that kindness isn't just about what we give, it's about what we receive. Every morning when I saw her smile, when I heard her say, 'God bless you, sweetheart,' I received far more than I gave. She taught me that every act of kindness comes back to us multiplied." What Sarah and Margaret didn't know was that their story was being quietly shared beyond the wedding. Guests posted about it on social media. Local news picked it up. Soon, their simple story of kindness was inspiring people across the country. Veterans organizations reported an increase in volunteers. Homeless shelters saw more donations. But more than that, people began to see the homeless individuals in their communities differently. They began to see the stories, the humanity, the potential that exists in every person. Margaret became a spokesperson for veterans' issues, sharing her story and advocating for others who were struggling. Sarah started a nonprofit organization connecting homeless veterans with support services and community volunteers. This is what happens when kindness meets courage, when one person decides to see another person's worth. It changes everything. 2 years later, Sarah and David's first anniversary party was held at the Veterans Center, where Margaret now works as a counselor. 15 soldiers were there again, but this time they were joined by dozens of other veterans, community volunteers, and formerly homeless individuals who had been helped by the programs Margaret and Sarah had started. Margaret, now living in her own apartment and thriving in her work, raised her glass for a toast. "To Sarah," she said, "who proved that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop, to see, to care, and to everyone here who has learned that lesson and passed it on." But perhaps the most beautiful moment came when a young veteran approached Sarah at the party. He'd been living on the streets for 6 months when he heard Margaret speak at a veterans center. Her story had given him hope, and with Margaret's help, he'd found housing and treatment for his PTSD. "Your kindness to Margaret," he told Sarah, "saved my life too. That's how it works, isn't it? One act of kindness becomes 100, becomes 1,000. As I finish this incredible story, I want to leave you with one final thought and question. Sarah Mitchell had no idea when she offered Margaret that first bread ring that she was setting in motion a chain of events that would touch hundreds of lives. She didn't do it for recognition or reward. She did it because she saw another human being who needed help, and she chose to respond with kindness. In our busy, often harsh world, it's easy to walk past suffering. It's easy to assume someone else will help. It's easy to think our small acts don't matter. But Margaret and Sarah's story proves that they do matter. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the potential to change everything. So here's my final question for you, and I really want you to answer this in the comments. What's one act of kindness you could perform this week for someone who might need it? It doesn't have to be big or dramatic. Maybe it's buying coffee for the person behind you in line. Maybe it's calling a friend who's been struggling. Maybe it's volunteering at a local shelter. Maybe it's simply smiling at someone who looks like they need it. Share your commitment in the comments below. Let's create our own ripple effect of kindness right here in this community. And if you do perform that act of kindness, come back and tell us how it went. Let's inspire each other to be the change we want to see in the world. Remember, kindness costs nothing, but its value is immeasurable. In a world that often seems divided and harsh, choosing kindness is choosing hope. It's choosing to believe that people matter, that small acts can have big impacts, and that love really can conquer all. Sarah gave Margaret food for her body, but Margaret gave Sarah food for her soul. And together, they fed an entire community with hope, dignity, and love. What will you feed the world with your kindness? Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and most importantly, share your kindness commitment in the comments below. Let's make kindness go viral.